Hey everybody. So last episode I talked about Blockbuster Video, a video rental chain that saved itself from near destruction in the late 90s, only to go bankrupt a decade later thanks to a changing landscape of new technologies. People like new things. We're almost always going to get rid of an old piece of technology in favor of a newer one that we view as being better in some way. Almost always. Sure, on an individual level, people like to look for the most advanced, cutting-edge thing, but in the maelstrom created when technology meets economics, very often the champion technologies are actually those that are the most mass-producible, reliable, versatile, and not most of all, cheap. Look at segmented displays. They've been in use since the early 70s, simply because they do the job without being overly complex or expensive. So, on a semi-related note, I want to play you guys some sounds. Now, chances are, if you had a toy laser gun or something similar at any point when you were a kid, you probably recognize at least one of these sound effects. But it's not just the toys of the past 20 or so years that make these sounds. People born in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s all seem to have memories of one of these sounds, or at least one like it. I was born a few years after 2000 and I recognize it too. So why? Why does every toy laser gun make the same few sounds? Well, let's find out. I'm going to take a step back to sort of explain what I'm talking about. Basically, almost any toy gun you can find, made within the last 40 years or so, makes one of a very small selection of sounds, regardless of who manufactured the gun, how old it is, or what it looks like. Now personally, I think this is one of those weird little modern technological mysteries that people either never noticed or just didn't care about, like how every gas station cash register makes the sonic ring sound, or how every crappy toy phone in the 90s and 2000s played Butterfly by Smile. But I intend to get to the bottom of this one. Now, of all these toy gun sounds, one in particular is super memorable to me. This one, that's made up of 8 different synthesized sounds, none of which actually really sound like an actual laser gun. Depending on the gun you got, they could play in order or randomly. There was even someone on my Discord who apparently owned a gun that would play all 8 sounds after each other when you pulled the trigger once. I owned several extremely cheap plastic laser gun toys as a kid, and around half of them played this set of sounds. I sort of forgot about it as I got older, but when I rediscovered one of the guns while looking through some old toys, I found out that not only did I remember what each of the sounds was, I could even recall the exact order they played in. I'd do a recreation of them here, but I'm not really sure how well they'd come across in a video. Anyway, a year or two later I got some cheap little laser gun toys at a dollar store and discovered, to my shock, that they played the exact same sounds, despite being 10 years newer, and from a totally different manufacturer, and completely different in appearance. I put up a poll on my Discord and found out that almost 2/3 of respondents also recalled owning a toy laser gun that made this sound as well. Weird, huh? This set of noises is one of a small handful of sound effects that seem to have totally dominated the toy laser gun industry since the 1980s. There's also this one, which sounds like the gates of hell being opened while a man shouts, "Fire!" And this one, which actually kind of sounds like a gun. But this isn't all personal experience. If you go on YouTube right now and search up toy laser gun sound effect, you'll find that a solid 80% of every single gun you find will make one of these 3 sound sets, or one extremely similar. In particular, this video stood out to me, where a man demonstrates a toy laser from the 1980s that makes the exact same 8 sounds as the one I picked up at the dollar store circa 2019. So what, is this some kind of global conspiracy where every toy laser manufacturer has conspired to make all their guns sound the same for some reason? To understand why this phenomenon exists, let's first talk about how a toy laser gun works. Now, similar to how some real-world weapons like the Kalashnikov rifle are designed to be simple, durable, and easy to produce so as to continue being viable for decades at a time, toy laser guns are usually made with the bare minimums in mind. If you do a teardown on one and remove its plastic casing, you'll find a simple circuit in which the gun's trigger engages a contact that allows power to flow through a few simple components. Your standard toy gun will have an LED light that flashes in a sequence and a sound circuit board that plays the gun's audio through a small speaker. A more deluxe model might also feature a small motor unit that makes the gun vibrate or spin something around. But let's take a closer look at that sound component. Now, the sounds emitted by a toy gun speaker are determined by the sound effect board it's wired to. The board usually either plays a recorded sound or emits wave tones. An example of the recorded sound method is that sensory overload sound effect from earlier where the guy keeps screaming. You'll see this a lot in some newer but equally cheap laser pistols. But it's the wavetone generator method that I really want to look at. You see, wavetone generation is pretty old, relatively speaking, and from the sound of these 8 sound bites I mentioned previously, the ones I was particularly familiar with, wavetones were used to create them. Now, a sound effect board that plays varying wavetones will most likely feature a small integrated circuit that generates these tones and sends them out to the speaker to play. And this integrated sound circuit is the exact chip we're gonna need to find if we want to track down this sound. A little bit of preliminary searching turned up this, the Ht2 Sound Effect Integrated Circuit, manufactured by Taiwanese company Hansatak Electronics. The chip is described as being able to produce, quote, 8 different sound effects, including, quote, rifle, alarm, bomb, and many more. An included sound recording proves that these are the exact sounds we're looking for. But there seems to be a problem. According to Hansatak's own website, quote, one of the fast-growing and dynamic semiconductor company in Taiwan was established in May 1st of 1993. And if a number of forum posts and YouTube videos are to be believed, toys were being made to create these sounds several years before this. It seems more likely than not that this chip is actually just a more modern reproduction of an older sound chip, so we gotta look a little deeper. This brings us to another chip entirely, the Ht2 8 Sound Generator, manufactured by Holtec Semiconductor Incorporated, once again based in Taiwan. According to its datasheet, the Ht2 functions virtually identically to the HK628, although it's got different names for the sound effects. The datasheet for the 2884 is stamped with a date from July of 1997. But then again, all of Holtec's sound chips have datasheets also marked with July 1997, so it's possible they just revised and released their sound chip datasheets at the same time, and the chips themselves had been in production a lot longer. I say this because, unlike Hansatak, Holtec was incorporated in 1983, a full 10 years earlier, which would put it squarely in the time frame these 8 sounds seem to have began in. So is this the origin point? Are these 8 classic laser gun sounds all because of the Ht2 Well, maybe not. You see, there's a bit of a wild card at work here. A company called Elenco Electronics has, for many years, manufactured a line of products under the name Snap Circuits. In essence, they're these little plastic circuit sets that kids can work with. Anyway, they make an integrated circuit component for Snap Circuits called Space War. As you can probably guess, it makes these same 8 damn sounds we've been looking for. But the Space War circuit isn't some cheap plastic toy. It's Elenco's own proprietary circuit. So how does it work? Well, older versions of the circuit were made so you had to actually solder all the components together. And if we look at some listings for the kit on eBay, as well as its original datasheet, we can see that the sound chip used isn't the Ht2 or the HK628. In fact, it's not even a sound chip at all. The Space War Sound Generator uses a Texas Instruments NE556 dual precision timer, which isn't actually a wavetone generator on its own, but is being used as such by the Space War board. The Space War instruction manual credits its original creation to 1989, and the Texas Instruments datasheet for the 556 series has its original print date listed as 1978, far and away the earliest date we've seen so far. And just to add a little extra confusion into the mix, the NE556 was also made in Taiwan. So what the hell is going on here? Why did Hansatak make a sound chip identical to Holtec's? Why did Elenco use a timer chip to make 8 laser sounds in 1989 when a dedicated sound chip for those sounds may have already existed? Which of these sound chip methods came first, if any? Unfortunately, I can't really answer many of these questions. All I really have to go on are the testimonials of random people on the internet and a few datasheets which don't really give me the info I'm looking for. If I had a couple old toys from the 80s and 90s, I might be able to look inside and figure out what circuits they use, but at the present moment I seem to be stumped. However, let me give my personal theory. The way I see it, in the late 1970s and early 80s, toys began to be made with lights and sounds using new circuit board technologies. At some unknown point, someone decided to use a timer chip, possibly the NE556, to set up a sequence of 8 sounds a toy gun could make. Holtec Semiconductor, seeing an opportunity, decides to design and manufacture their own streamlined version of this system, the Ht2 a dedicated sound chip which not only generates these 8 sounds, but also sequences LEDs for good measure. Somewhere in the 90s, Holtec stops manufacturing the 2884, or at least stops making it readily available, and fellow Taiwanese electronics manufacturer Hansatak makes a chip that's a near replica, the HK628, to fill the gap. As for why these simple chips ended up in millions of weird little toys all over the world, well, the answer to that is a lot simpler and doesn't really need theorizing. It's cheap. For companies seeking to make the cheapest possible toys, buying a pre-made sound chip and simply plugging it into your board is a hell of a lot easier than designing your own sound circuits. And as such, the 2884 and the 628 found their way into the heart of the cheap plastic toy industry. I'm a little disappointed I wasn't able to discover more about these 8 weird little sounds. The most obvious question seems to be, where did they come from in the first place? And I get the feeling that until I talk to someone directly involved or take a good look at some toys from the 80s that made use of these early circuits, I won't be able to know for sure. But suffice to say, if this sequence of crusty wave tones has been seared into your mind from a young age, you probably have one of these 2 or 3 integrated circuits to thank for it. Who would have thought that the desire to make as cheap of a toy as possible could have implanted a shared audio memory in the recollections of so many people? At the end of the day, there's really only one thing we can know for sure. If this all began in any one place, it was probably Taiwan. Thanks for watching.